Hi, I'm Ross from Airsoft, and today we're going to be talking about kit sustainment, specifically food and water. So obviously we talk a lot about gear and replicas and all the different things that you should plan and bring to a op, especially ones that are longer than 24 hours. But something that we don't always talk about, but I know a lot of people have questions about, is sustainment. So that is kind of what I want to talk about today, is both what you should bring in terms of food and water, and a pretty good kind of plan to have in mind when going into a 24-hour or 48-hour or any event that is going to be longer than your typical open play session. So I'm going to go through kind of my guide and useful tips to keep in mind when planning for these events. And I'm going to be focusing on specifically a 40-hour event. So how to prep for a 40-hour event is kind of what I'm going to be going over in this. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe. It really helps us out. But let's get into it. So we're gonna start by talking about water. Now, of course, everything in this video is gonna be very dependent on you as a person, both your body weight, your activity level, how you really intake food on a daily basis is gonna be important. It's gonna be a very personalized thing for you. I'll say though that there are some pretty good guidelines you can follow when it comes to bringing things on the field, specifically water. Typically, I recommend not having any less than 4 to 5 liters of water on you when stepping out on the field. That's typically gonna be for cooler weather with slower pace and a more conservative use of water overall. That's kind of your minimum, I'd say, is 4 to 5 liters. A recommended amount would be 5 to 6 liters, and then anywhere from 6 to 8 liters is what I'd recommend if you're doing really strenuous activity or you're in a very hot environment where you're gonna be sweating a lot. You're gonna want more water. So the weather and the AO, the amount of movement you're doing, all of that is things to take into consideration with how much water you should bring. That also leaves wanting to plan to have your backpack a little bit lighter if you're doing more movements, but also carrying more water. So these are just things you have to think about. Certain items you might have to leave behind in replace for certain other items. Sustainment is always going to be important. So make sure that you are really planning how much water you're bringing. So for games like Milsim West, where you are out on the field for 40 hours, you do have some interesting other things going on outside of your own water supply, such as medic water. If you haven't been to a Milsim West, the way medic water typically works is after you've been hit once and tourniqueted, to get back in after your second hit, you would have to drink a complete water bottle and then hand it back to your medic to come back in. So that is a way that they encourage drinking water while out on the field playing. That can kind of allow you to bring less water depending on the situation. If you know you're going to be a front force in a lot of fighting, and if you expect to be getting shot a lot and getting out a lot, you might be able to get away with bringing less water because you will be drinking it out on the field during gameplay. But that's not always a guarantee. You know, at the end of the day, you're trying not to get hit while playing Airsoft, and there's always the likelihood of you never actually making it to that point of needing a medic water. So I would never rely on that. You also do not want to be the person in the squad who is drinking your medic water because you need water and not using it for the medic water purposes. So keep that in mind, that certain events will have water kind of in the gameplay to kind of keep you hydrated, but do not rely on that. Definitely bring your own water and make sure that that is your primary source of hydration throughout the weekend. So when carrying water on you, I see a lot of people use hydration packs. They are a very, very useful tool. It is nice having all that water right on your back with a very easy access to drinking it throughout the day. I personally don't like using hydration packs. I prefer doing it in water bottles, and I'll tell you why. The first reason, and my biggest reason, is because I can see how much water I've drank throughout the day. I can look at a 1 liter water bottle and I can visually tell how much of it I've had. And that really helps me track how much water I'm taking in. And typically when I go to an event, I actually have a hydration plan. I want to get 1 liter down, 1 full bottle by the end of Friday night. I want to do 3 throughout Saturday, and then I want 2 in the Sunday. So that's kind of what goes in my head when I go out on the field, and I keep track of that as I'm drinking water out of my water bottles, and I'm able to tell how much water I'm doing. When I'm out of water, I can easily just collapse those bottles into nothing, and they take up no space in my bag or any weight, so that's not really a problem after the fact of drinking it. As long as you have a pouch on you that is easily accessible, I think that that is the better option personally. Of course, using hydration bladder isn't a problem at all. In fact, it's probably very useful for many people. It just doesn't work for me. So that's one of those things I'm saying when it comes to your personal preference and opinion. However, it works best for you, whatever's going to keep you hydrated the best, whether that's drinking a water bottle off of your kit or using the hydration bladder. Do that. I personally just find being able to track my water intake is the most efficient for myself personally. So I see some people talk about water purification, both tablets and the filtered straws. I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing ever to have on your kit, as they're typically pretty lightweight, but I would never rely on it as an option for hydration. I wouldn't even really rely on it as a backup option. I would have a hydration, I would have a backup option, and then that would be more like an emergency option. Most of the time, you're not going to be going out of your way to find natural water sources. There are plenty of times where you're going to come across them, but that is absolutely not guaranteed. And the last thing you want to do is make your squad or group go out of the way for water source because you need to filter it or something of that nature. Very useful tools, but in a 40-hour event, it's not always going to be the easiest and most reliable thing. So I would not rely on that at all. If it's something you want to carry on you for emergencies, feel free, but I would not take that as a necessarily good option for hydration on the field. Another really important aspect of hydration is obviously going to be electrolytes and sodium. This is something that any sports professional could tell you over and over again. I'm sure you've heard it your entire life, but as you sweat, you're losing a lot of that sodium and other electrolytes, and you need to replenish that throughout the weekend. So bringing electrolyte packets and mixing it in with your water is always a good option. You could also go with salty foods, which is something we can talk about more in the food section. But making sure that you are well hydrated is not just drinking water, it's also keeping that sodium and electrolytes up. Because at the end of the day, you really want to be at your full capacity throughout the weekend, especially when you're running off no sleep and other things like that. You don't need dehydration on top of it. So make sure that you're bringing electrolyte packets, anything that can kind of keep your sodium up, salty stuff to mix with that water and consume with the water to make sure that you are really staying up on hydration. That is something that I'm not a professional on. You can look at a lot of different things on, what the right amounts of that is and how to pace yourself. It's all going to depend on your body, but just keep in mind that drinking water alone is not going to be enough. The biggest thing is drinking before you're thirsty. Making sure that you are hydrated is not just about when you're thirsty. Drink typically when you feel thirsty or already dehydrated. So just make sure that you're drinking water anytime you have a break or a moment to breathe. Sit down, drink a little bit of your water, really feel your body and tell when you need to rehydrate. Don't wait till the last moment. The last thing I'll say about bringing hydration is going to be an energy drink. This isn't something that I necessarily recommend. I'm also not somebody who does energy drinks, but I know plenty of people on the field bring an energy drink as both a familiar pick-me-up, a little bit of caffeine, and just something that's, outside of your regular water diet, whether that is like a little soda for you or something like that. Sometimes having a drink that isn't just water can really do a good mood boost in the middle of an event. I typically see people bring a single energy drink or something like that in the ruck, and Saturday morning after that first ruck in, it can really be a good addition. But do not rely on energy drinks or anything of that sort to be your hydration. That should be outside of your hydration plan entirely and not looked at as part of your hydration. But so the final thing I'll say about water is just having that plan. Bringing the amount of liters that you need, but then being aware of how much of it you want to drink and sticking to that while you're on the field. Having a liter of water on you is not the same as thinking I need to finish this liter before the end of this night. That way I'm properly hydrated for tomorrow. So just make sure that you are fully planning, because it doesn't really matter how much water you have on you if you're not actually taking the time to drink. So at the end of the day, having a hydration plan is important for many reasons. I think the biggest though is to make sure that you're not over or under packing. You have an exact amount of water that you plan on drinking throughout a weekend, and you can kind of prepare for that beforehand. So food. Food is going to be a harder one for Airsoft. It's not as straightforward as just the amount of water to bring. It is all about, your preferences in food. And there's a lot of different techniques and ways I've seen people pack food for longer events and do sustainment in food. So I'm going to talk about kind of what I think is the best way of doing it and what I've personally found works the best for me. But as I've said before, it is so up to you as the player. What you like to eat, the amount of calories you need, things of that nature are going to be very, very much up to you. So keep that in mind throughout this. I like to stay between 3,000 and 4,000 calories for a 40-hour weekend, but at the same time, I typically operate on a calorie deficit for a weekend game, and I eat a very large meal before and after. Not the best plan ever. It doesn't work for everyone. It works for me. It is what I am kind of okay doing, and my body can handle it. But if you need a lot of that food on the field to keep you up, keep your energy up, then that's something you just have to plan for. I'm gonna go over some of the foods I like to bring and kind of talk about why I bring those over certain other foods and what I do to make it really easier for the event overall. So I try to keep things simple. I'm not trying to do a 3-course meal throughout the weekend. A lot of times when people think about packing for food, you think breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For me, that is not the case. It's usually more of a series of snacks throughout the day. A lot of me and Eric have joked about eating like gerbils for the weekend. It's all dry foods. And I'll kind of talk about why that is. But some items that I think are useful to pack and to consider bringing as food items would be protein bars, peanut butter, beef jerky, trail mix, some sort of candy, a little bit of sugar just to kind of get your mood up, you know. Hard cheeses are usually good for the first day, and I really like the pulled pork and tuna packets that you can get as well. They're sealed and you can just break them open and squeeze them out. You don't even need a spoon or anything. I like to bring flour tortillas if you want to wrap anything up, you know, do peanut butter and a flour tortilla or maybe some meats and cheeses, something like that. Tortillas have a lot of calories in themselves and they won't get crushed in a bag like bread would or something like that. So for MREs, something that I see a lot of people bring, and that stands for meal ready to eat. I mean, it's typically what the military brings as their sustainment source. I find a lot of people will bring those and they are great options for a meal, but my biggest concern is just the size and weight of them. They take up a lot of space in a bag. I find that if you break them down, specifically taking out the main dish or entree and maybe the peanut butter or the dessert or a couple other of the snacks that you like in there, but not bringing the entire MRE is usually the best way of doing it. It keeps a lot of that space and weight down and allows you to bring those core calorie items. The biggest thing for me is that I'm not cooking an MRE. I'm not bringing any of the heating pad or anything like that because I don't want to use the water to cook. And that kind of goes into why we kind of eat like gerbils throughout a weekend and aren't cooking meals. I find bringing something to cook with, like a campfire oven, anything of that nature, is going to be a bit extra and a lot more weight to be carrying around. Specifically with not only the actual cooking stuff, but then the propane as well. There's a lot of additional items that need to go into being able to cook, whether it's a pot, pan, anything like that. Carrying that on a ruck, even as small as they can get with camping, is just adding weight to your kit that you don't need, in my opinion. A nice hot meal is very, very nice at an event. If you sit down and you have a hot dinner after a long day, it is rewarding in such a way that I can't describe. But for me personally, when I am tired, exhausted, cold, and wet, the last thing I want to do is pull out my burner, screw together my propane, and get it all fired. I just want to lay in my sleeping bag and eat some beef jerky. So that is what I opt to do. Now, if that's for you, totally up to you. I'm fine eating a cold MRE. It's not the best thing ever, but I'll do it to get those calories in me. I personally don't like carrying that extra water for cooking, even if that's just in the MRE bag itself. I know it doesn't take a lot of water, but that's just not something I like planning for personally. So I typically bring everything with the idea in mind that I'm eating it raw, cold, and right there on the field. Now, the last thing I'll say, something that a lot of people here at Amped have been a fan of in the past, and people who I've played games with on their teams have done before, is what is called a pocket burger. This is essentially going to McDonald's, getting a bunch of the single cheeseburgers or just the single hamburgers and balling them up into a tight little packed ball and shoving them in your pocket and then just eating those all weekend. I'm not too sure what the safety is of keeping a burger in your pocket for 48 hours is. I'm not too sure how good that is calorie-wise or for your body, but people do it and they seem to make it through. So if something like that is an option for you, it's something to consider. But personally, I like depending more on just beef jerky, nuts, protein bars, things of that nature, and drinking a lot of water in conjunction with it. So to reiterate, the biggest thing in my opinion is not packing too much food. It's very easy to think you're gonna need breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's just not the case. I personally find myself skipping most meals and being so focused on the action, I actually have to stop myself and find time to eat food. I usually have to remind myself I'm running at a calorie deficit and to remember to eat, and even sometimes force food down if I'm not really hungry. That's just me. It's gonna be different for everybody. But remember that at the end of the day, you really want food that you enjoy. If you're eating something that you hate, you're not gonna have a fun time. You want something that you're actually gonna like. I definitely recommend trying all of your food before going on the field for multiple reasons. The biggest reason though being that you don't want something that's going to give you stomach problems, heartburn, anything like that, any sort of discomfort from food that you're not used to eating normally. If you bring an MRE with you and you haven't eaten an MRE before and it gives you a bunch of heartburn on the field, you are not going to have a fun time. So I highly recommend eating all of your food, drinking some of your water, trying it all before actually going out on the field and using it as sustainment, because the last thing you want is 24 hours into an event and your stomach starts to be upset. So that is just my really, really solid advice, is to try everything, plan it, make sure you have a plan for what you're eating and when, and kind of sticking to that. That's kind of a brief overview of sustainment between both water and food and kind of what I recommend bringing on the field. However, of course, it is very adaptable to whatever you would like to do, but I think that there are a few main rules that if you follow, you'll be really well off when it comes to sustainment. The first of which being don't run out of water, make a plan and stick to it. If you do that, you should have a very easy time managing your water resources as long as you are sticking to the plan you created before the event. Have a plan for electrolytes. You are not just replacing your water, you are replacing your sodium and other electrolytes. So consider that in your hydration plan as well. Keep your food simple, prioritize calories, durability, and how easy it is to eat. And then finally, test your sustainment. Not only should you try all of the food to make sure that your body can, adjust to it and handle it properly, but also make sure that you pack your ruck full of everything you're carrying, go out on a couple of rucks and move around with that weight and make sure that it's a manageable amount for you to carry. If it's too heavy, if it's really light, you might be able to fit a little bit of extra, maybe some snacks for some of your battle buddies. If it's way too heavy, you might have to lose some things. These are things that you should be keeping in mind because sustainment is not just about eating and drinking on the field, it's about getting it to where it needs to be and managing it successfully. So that's kind of my overview on sustainment. I would love to hear what your guys' go-to foods are on the field, how you like to manage your water, and what your kind of general sustainment plan is when going to an event. Because I personally find that it is just as important as figuring out all of the gear and making sure that everything else is set away for an event. I think sustainment is one of the key pieces. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said, please subscribe. It really, really helps us out. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.